This is another lecture of international trade for week number 7. Last time we started to discuss the issue of multinational production. Today we are going to really focus during the whole lecture on this topic, and first thing I'm going to do is to give you an overview over the state of play 2019 and 2020. We have already seen some of the numbers about inflows and outflows, and we'll go a little bit deeper into that picture. After that, we will spend some time discussing the OLI, ownership locational internalization approach. And from there we go on to see what the influence of monopolistic competition, what the influence of oligopolies, monopolies, duopolies is in the context of the multinational enterprise. Then we will take a look at what are the real important issues behind an explanation of why multinational enterprises exist. Yes, what does it take for a firm to decide to produce in other countries? What are the important determinants of that decision? Are these the endowments of the countries? Yes, where the affiliate, the subsidiary is located? Is it the characteristics of the goods that the firm produces? Is it the characteristic of the firm? Is it the characteristic of the industry? Those are the questions that we will try to answer. And finally, we will draw some conclusions and take a look at the scope left for further research. Well, this is the table that we had in the last lecture. Just wanted to recall what the distribution of inflows and outflows was in the year 2019. As you can see here, most of the flows, they originate in developed countries. These are the outflows from developed countries, and these are the inflows to developed countries. So most of the outflows from this group, they stay within the group. Only 117 billion go outside. Now we take a look at the outflows from developing countries, and you can see here that the outflows are much lower than the inflows. Yes, so you have inflows from multinational enterprises originating in other developing countries, but most of the inflows that we have here, or at least a large share, comes from developed countries. And if you take a look at the regional distribution, we find that most of these inflows and outflows in the developing world take place in Asia and Oceania. Then number 2 is Latin America, and number 3 is the African continent. Here we have the transitional countries as an extra group of countries. Sometimes they are put together with the developed, and sometimes they're put together with the developing countries. So what's the state of play in 2020? COVID-19, of course, caused FDI to fall, foreign direct investment to fall from $1.5 trillion in 2019 to just $1 trillion in 2020. This is a decrease of 35%, and it's more than 20% larger than during the Great Recession after the financial crisis in 2009. The decrease this time was heavily skewed towards developed and transitional countries. So 58% of this decrease took place in developed and transitional countries and not in developing countries. Yes, the decrease in developing countries only amounted to 8% on average. The conclusion is that 2/3 of foreign direct investment inflows 2020 went to developing countries. What about Africa? The African continent, we have a decrease of around 16%. And within the 60%, we have a large decrease amounting to 62% with respect to greenfield projects, which are the most important projects. And this happened particularly in manufacturing. And it also happened particularly in the manufacturing industry of commodity exporting countries. Now, the current level in 2021 of flows, inflows and outflows, is around 25% lower than in 2019. What is the forecast for 2021 and 2022? Well, foreign direct investment flows are expected to bottom out in 2021 and to recover strongly in 2021 and 2022 by between 10 and 15%. So the overall level is going to be lower than the one that we saw in 2019 and the years before. All these data you can find in the World Investment Report published by UNCTAD, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And these reports may be downloaded from UNCTAD's website. Now let us take a look at the stock as opposed to the flows. As you know, in economics, we always have to differentiate between stocks and flows. So this is about the existing stock of foreign direct investment in developed and developing countries. Let's take a look at developing countries. You see here that developing countries have more than almost 12,000 billion or 12 trillion US dollars as inward foreign direct investment, and they own 8,000, almost 700 billion US dollars in terms of outward foreign direct investment. Take a look at the developed countries, and we also find the highest numbers here, both in terms of inward and outward stock of foreign direct investment. The distribution within developing countries is similar as the one that we found for the flows. Yes, so number one is Asia, Oceania, number two, Latin America, and number three, Africa. What does this mean? This means that in Africa we still have a lot of potential attraction for foreign direct investment. And let me repeat that. It's not necessarily foreign direct investment only from developed countries. Yes, it may also be foreign direct investment from developing countries, multinational enterprises from other developing countries, from Africa itself, but also from Asia or from Latin America. And not always, if we speak about Asia, it's not only Chinese, it's also from other Asian countries. What is the overall goal of a multinational enterprise? Very simple. It's just to supply foreign markets. This begs the question, why does a firm establish a foreign subsidiary? Why doesn't it use other alternatives to supply foreign markets? What are the alternatives? Well, firms may export, may license an independent firm, or join a joint venture with another firm. So why should a firm produce in a foreign country and thereby compete with indigenous firms which are better integrated into local networks and more familiar with local tastes and written and unwritten rules? Well, the OLI approach, the OLI, intends to give us an answer to this question. There are three necessary conditions for the emergence of a multinational enterprise. One is the ownership of knowledge, and the other two are the existence of locational advantage and the existence of internalization advantages. What is that? Knowledge ownership, knowledge-based assets allow a multinational enterprise to produce better, more distinctive, and possibly cheaper products than local producers. Knowledge may be patented, and it may be derived from own research and development. It may be derived from superior entrepreneurial capacity. It may be derived from superior organizational skills. Knowledge, of course, may be supported by a reputation for quality and reliability. And this reputation may be built on advertising, branding, and trademarking. Very, very important. All these above hypotheses are supported by empirical research. What are locational advantages? Well, the mere possession of knowledge-based assets does not really imply that the best way to use them profitably is by going multinational. So there are some other aspects that also play an important role here. Fixed costs, the size of the market, transport costs, the tax burden in the home and in the foreign market. All those influences determine whether production takes place only in the home market or in both the home and the foreign markets. Locational advantages can see from figure 11.1 on page 354, the prescribed reading, where fixed and transportation costs and the tax regime are linked to the size of the market in the plane capital L star, with higher case L being the size of the domestic market and higher case L star being the size of the foreign markets. Three areas can be identified in this figure. One for the production only in the home market, another one for the production only in the foreign market, and the third one for the production in both countries. When both markets are sufficiently large and transport costs are high enough, production takes place in both countries. In the latter case, fixed costs may be spread over a larger production volume. What is transfer pricing? Well, if a firm goes multinational, then of course it has to export or import, it has to trade some goods between the parent company and the subsidiary, the affiliate. The price at which the parent firm transfers goods to its affiliate is transfer pricing. It can be designed in such a way that profits are directed to the country where the tariffs and the tax burden are lowest, thereby maximizing profits. There is empirical evidence that the determinants just mentioned play a role in explaining foreign direct investment. Particularly, income shifting to low tax countries appears to be an important reason for the choice of location and the design of transfer pricing. What is internalization? It's internalization, I repeat, not uh, it's not it's internalization. And it's not going international, it's internalizing. Yes, taking something inside. To internalize is the opposite of externalize. Yes, internalization advantage. What are the factors that determine the profitability of outsourcing production relative to in-house production? Well, one problem that we might have if we outsource production is the dissipation of knowledge. Another one is the loss of reputation. If knowledge is transferred to a joint venture partner or to an independent licensee in a foreign country, the parent firm incurs a higher cost than if it would transfer this knowledge through in-house channels to the affiliate. Also, the receiving firms may not have the resources to enforce the agreement to avoid disclosure, dissipation of the knowledge transferred. So it's very difficult to enforce that for the parent company. Loss of reputation. Assume a case in which a firm owns the knowledge to produce a good in two qualities, high quality and low quality. It decides to find a licensee to sell the good in the foreign country. The licensee is only able to produce the low quality variant, but at a lower cost than the licensor. Since the licensee sells the product at the higher price, the licensee's profit is higher than the licensor's. As long as consumers believe that the licensee sells the high quality variant of the product, the licensor's reputation remains unaffected. As soon as consumers discover that they have been buying the low quality variant at the higher price, the licensor loses its reputation. So dissipation of knowledge and loss of reputation are two reasons for in-house production in a foreign country. Incomplete contracts and opportunistic behavior. Generally, transactions between firms may be short-run or long-run. Short-run buying and selling spot market are extremely flexible, and firms can adjust almost costlessly in response to changing market conditions. Logging itself into long-term contracts, however, must confer advantages that outweigh the loss of flexibility. There are instances in which a long-term contract is the best choice. For example, if a machine tool firm produces machine tools especially ordered by a customer and not needed by other firms, the cost of the tailor-made machine tool is sunk as soon as the machine tool is produced. It can only be sold to the firm that ordered it. A long-term contract commits the buyer to purchase the machine tool. In the absence of such a contract that allows recovery of some costs, no supplier will be willing to produce the good. A contract spells out each side's obligations, the responses to different contingencies, and the penalties for non-performance. In this context, transaction costs are the costs incurred in negotiating such a contract and in enforcing it. If transaction costs are zero, then the parties enter into contracts that specify each party's obligations. These contracts, which are called complete contracts, would never need revisions, and all parties would honor them regardless of the circumstances that may occur. In practice, however, transaction costs are always positive and larger the more complex the deal and the less certain the future. That is why Real-world contracts, so-called incomplete contracts, never spell out every detail of the transaction, which means that there always is a certain risk associated with them. Incomplete contracts open the door to opportunistic behavior. Buyer and seller might both try to escape from their obligations, invoking changing market conditions in an attempt to reduce the price. This behavior is called the hold-up problem. The conclusion is that under such circumstances, the machine tool firm can decide to choose vertical integration of input production and final output production as a mode of organizing production in order to avoid the hold-up problem. However, hold-up problems may also arise within a vertical organization. You might have heard of the principal-agent problem. When self-interested employees act opportunistically by not providing unobservable optimal effort. Although the scope for holdups remain larger when dealing with independent firms, the ultimate choice between in-house production and arm's length contracting is determined by the ability to appropriate the larger part of the surplus. An independent firm would tend to underinvest, while a vertical organization will tend to overinvest. And this is why the preferred option is more likely to be arm's length contracting when the required investments of both parties are similar. Vertical integration is more likely to arise when the investment required from one party is important relative to the investment of the other party. Holder problems and principal agent problems, adverse selection and moral hazard, are intimately related to informational asymmetries in the sense of Nobel laureate George Akerlof's 1970 paper, The Market for Lemons, Quality Uncertainty and the Market Mechanism. This is the market for used cars. And I have uploaded for you a paper by Jonathan Levin, published 2001, who discusses Akerlof's original paper and adds some interesting aspects about the gains from trade. So Akerlof's paper tells us that there is an asymmetry between the buyer and the seller of a used car. The seller knows much more about the car than the buyer. And, the odds are that the seller generally takes advantage of his knowledge in order to sell a car maybe that is not worth the price that is asked for it. But since the buyer doesn't know the car and doesn't generally have the opportunity to find out more before buying it, yes, the probability is that the buyer buys a bad car. And so the idea, Akerlof's idea, is to increase the availability of information so that buyer and seller have almost the same information about the product. And this would make the market function much better. And we have exactly the same thing in the relationship between the parent and the affiliate, or the relationship between a firm and in the home country and an independent firm in the foreign country. Yes? Where we don't share the same information set. So if we take a look at oligopolistic firms in the context of multinational enterprises, We find out that imperfect competition also has an influence on the decision of whether to serve a foreign market through exports or through a local plant. Assume the case of a firm in the domestic market that has incurred a firm-specific fixed cost involving management, marketing, research and development, and a plant-specific fixed cost, capital F, in the home market. Exporting entails transport costs represented by the Greek symbol tau per unit export. Production in the plant carries the marginal cost lowercase c. The home firm knows that following its entry in the foreign market, a local firm might also enter the market. Assume also the same costs of home and local firms and that both firms compete as Cournot duopolists. The first stage of the game, the home firm makes a choice. In the second stage, the local firm decides to enter or not to enter the market. The home and the foreign market are both segmented, which means that they are independent from one another. It suffices to analyze the foreign market. Figure 11.3 on page 360 of the prescribed reading shows the firm's duopoly response functions in the plane Q and Q star, with Q representing the incumbent's production and Q star the local firm's production. The home firm's response function is lowercase re when it exports, and it is represented by r lowercase r mne when it serves the foreign market through a local affiliate. The foreign firm's best response function is lowercase r star. Since the home firm's marginal export sales costs C plus tau are higher than C, the export response function is lower than the affiliate response function. Now, if a foreign firm enters the market and the home firm serves it by exporting, the duopoly equilibrium is at point H. If the home firm serves the foreign market instead through an affiliate, the equilibrium is at J, not anymore at H. And since at H output is smaller than at J, the price is higher at H than at J. Profits of the foreign firm are higher at H than at J. But if its profits are positive at J, the foreign firm will enter the market regardless of the channel through which the home firm serves the foreign market. The home firm exports if and only if its profits are higher at H than at J, less the cost F. If not, then the affiliate model applies. If a foreign firm's profits at H are negative, it will not enter the market. In this case, the home firm may exploit the situation as a monopoly and choose a new mode. The interesting case here is the one in which the foreign firm's profit at H are positive when entering the market and the home firm is exporting. In this case, the home firm has to choose the right option by comparing its profits at point B, of course, minus the cost F and H. If profits are higher at H, it will export and otherwise invest in an affiliate. So this is the most interesting case. So here you see that when imperfect competition comes in, the behavior of both firms change. So in the case of a duopoly, one firm waits till the other has taken a decision and then adjusts. adjust the quantity and sometimes also the price. Another aspect of multinational enterprises, or the decision either to export or to serve foreign market through local plant, can be analyzed focusing on both industry and country characteristics. And in order to analyze, at the level of industries, at the level of firms, at the level of goods, and at the level of countries, yes, we then have 4 levels of analysis. We need also to have some definitions. What do we understand under outsourcing? Well, outsourcing is the procurement of an input from an independent supplier. We don't say if it's an independent supplier, if it's in a foreign country or if it's in the home country. It's just an independent supplier, does not belong to the firm. Offshoring is the procurement of an input from a foreign country, either from an independent firm or from an affiliate. But it's just coming from a foreign country, that's why it's offshoring. Nearshoring is the opposite, procurement of an input from a foreign country that is not so far away. So here we put some transport costs into the focus. Vertically fragmented multinational enterprises, firms that obtain inputs from an affiliate in a foreign country. And of course, as I mentioned before, you can define outsourcing as foreign outsourcing or domestic outsourcing, remains the same. So either procurement of an input from an independent foreign firm or from an independent domestic firm. There are a number of papers by authors such as Antrasch, based on models presented by Krugman and Heltman and Grossman and Hart, where we find analysis of multinational enterprises deciding on whether to integrate horizontally or vertically. Differing from the analysis we saw hitherto, the focus is on capital and labor-intensive goods, capital and labor-intensive firms, and industries, and the endowments of the countries where the plants are located. Also, issues discussed include the product cycle and the contractability of required investments. The results from empirical research reveal that intra-firm trade relates positively to product, firm, industry, and country characteristics such as firm-level productivity, capital intensity, skill intensity, headquarter intensity, and the factor abundancy of countries. An important aspect of the empirical results is that intra-firm trade tends to originate in countries with well-functioning judicial institutions. That is, where the rule of law makes it feasible to enforce a contract in an acceptable period of time and at an acceptable cost. What do we conclude from this? Multinational enterprises are generally the most productive firms in their industry. But often than not, they operate under imperfect competition. Ownership-based assets are indispensable to overcome competition from host country producers, and the variation in multinational activity correlates with research and development intensity and with advertising intensity. Multinational enterprises produce and sell large quantities of their goods and are prepared to bear the additional fixed costs of operating in several countries. Empirical research confirms the relevance of trade barriers such as tariffs, quotas, subsidies, taxation for the multinational enterprise's decision to own plants in foreign countries. However, the drive towards fragmentation of production is occasionally supported by trade barriers and industrialization strategies, for example, by import substitution behind high walls of tariffs. Internalization is what distinguishes multinational activity from unadorned outsourcing. A firm's desire to avoid opportunistic behavior of independent firms is the key motive behind internationalization of a firm. Remember, internalization is not internationalization of a firm. The last one, internationalization, is going international. And this has nothing to do with internalization, which is the opposite of externalization. A country's contract enforcement determines whether it is served through exports or affiliate production. With this sentence, you can explain a lot of FDI missing in the African continent, because in many African countries it is not possible to enforce a contract. And this, of course, keeps FDI, multinational enterprises, from both developing and developed countries outside. What is the scope for further research? Most of the hypotheses derive from theoretical models of multinational enterprises. They're rather confirmed by empirical research. Unfortunately, a large share of this research refers to developed countries. And since over the past 3 or 4 decades, many multinational enterprises originated in developing countries, future research should focus more on firms from developing countries, their behavior, and the economic impact on their home countries. Thank you very much.